Today we're going to be looking at the Samsung S90F versus the Samsung S95F. Is it better to go with the premium model or stick with the mid-range option? Stick around and find out. How's it going, everybody? It's KG from SamMobile. We're going to be taking a look at two OLED TVs today. Both of them are going to be QD OLED. This is going to be really important to remember because some S90F models won't be a QD OLED. For more information on whether or not you're going to be getting the S90F QD OLED variant, definitely check out our review that we did of the S90F. But without further ado, let's get right into this comparison. With the choice between the S90F and the S95F, Samsung has created quite the dilemma for a lot of people out there looking for a Samsung OLED TV. And in a lot of cases, some of the decisions are going to be made for you whether or not you like the design choices that go into the TVs themselves. For example, the S95F is always going to have a One Connect box where the S90F does not have the One Connect box. The One Connect box is going to be a separate breakout box where you input all of your connections, and if you're not somebody that likes that design, well then that choice is already made for you that you probably won't want to get the S95F. The same thing can be said about the screen coating on the S95F as well. If you're not a big fan of the way that the screen coating is, then you're probably somebody that ends up liking the S90F's glossy finish instead. These are design choices that Samsung has made that may or may not affect your TV buying decision. Another thing Samsung has done is that certain regions, the S90F is going to be a WOLED, and that will be a really unfortunate thing for the people that want a S90F in a certain size, but it ends up being a WOLED. So for those people that want a QD OLED in a size that's not offered in the S90F, unfortunately, you will have to be buying the S95F and spending a little bit more money if you want a Samsung QD OLED. And I want to be very clear on this topic. When we're talking about the S90F and the S95F today, we're talking about them both being QD OLED TVs. So in this comparison, that's what they are. And the visuals that you see are both QD OLED. And in front of you, you'll see a lot of examples of the S95F being the brighter TV overall. And in many cases, this is going to be true. But there is definitely going to be cases where they look very similar. And in fact, I was surprised that they traded blows as much as they did, despite the S95F being a more capable TV overall in terms of peak brightness. The peak brightness of the S95F is somewhere around 2300 nits on HDR, while the S90F is around 1700 nits for its peak brightness. This is really only going to show up in higher graded content and gaming. And in HDR, it will show up if you like to use dynamic tone mapping a lot. The S90F won't be as bright as the S95F in those occasions. Another place where you will see the S90F will fall behind the S95F in brightness is going to be in standard dynamic range. This is known as SDR. When we're talking about HDR footage, that's high dynamic range. That's going to be some movies on Netflix and other streaming services if you're going to pay for the packages that offer those movies and TV shows in that format. And for everything else like broadcast TV and sports, you'll see most of that stuff in standard dynamic range. So that will be known as SDR. And same thing with gaming in mind as well. Most games should be in HDR these days if you're playing on an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. But if you're playing on a Nintendo Switch, right now everything is in standard dynamic range. In the future, when the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, you will see HDR games with that console. So the content that you put on these TVs will matter quite a bit. I think that if you're somebody who's doing a lot of SDR and you care about SDR brightness because you're in a brighter room, the S95F makes a lot of sense. Not only is it going to be a good TV for a brighter room in a lot of cases with that screen coating, but it's also going to be a good TV for a brighter room because of the peak brightness that it can get to. Now, the S90F should be fine in a bright room as well because the peak brightness of the SDR is actually pretty decent for an OLED TV. But if you are somebody that needs the absolute maximum peak brightness, then the S95F is going to have to be the choice for you if you're going after that kind of thing. So other than peak brightness, what separates the TVs with picture quality in mind? Well, one difference people usually point to is how good is the processing of the TVs. Well, in this case, the processing of the TVs is actually going to be very similar across the board, and I really didn't notice a huge difference here at all. And that is because they both use the same exact processor. And both of them will be improved from last year's processor that was in the S95D and the S90D. So upscaling and things like that will be the same across the board for the S90F and the S95F. So in regards to picture quality, other than peak brightness, I do think that they're going to be very equal across the board, and the peak brightness is going to be the biggest separator of the two. Now, when you're talking about gaming, that is where you will actually see a big difference in terms of the performance of the TV, because the S95F has support all the way up to 165 Hertz with VRR, where the S90F only has up to 144 Hertz with VRR. Now, I have to stress, this is only going to really impact PC gamers, as consoles are only going to be able to go up to 120 Hz in the first place. Both of the TVs have support for Game Motion Plus, so you will be able to use motion interpolation with gaming, which I really do think is a great feature that goes along with these Samsung TVs. And I do think that both have excellent color for game mode when you are setting them up properly. Now, setting these TVs up in game mode is a little bit of a task though, so you do have to keep that in mind. And if you want any information on how to set the TVs up, I could give you my personal recommended settings in a future video, or you could just ask me in the comments below. I'll be sure to try to give you the best results for me personally. But I do want to stress that you should set the TVs how you want to set them accordingly. You shouldn't really follow anybody's guidelines unless that's exactly what you're trying to go for. Now, one thing I know a lot of people like to do with their standard dynamic range gaming is to game at higher peak brightnesses. And those of you that love to do that will love both TVs, but you will especially love the S95F, as the peak brightness can get much higher than the S90F, as you can see in this example here. The SDR brightness of the S95F absolutely blew me away and took me to a different level of gaming that I didn't even know I could do. And this difference actually won't just be in SDR. It will be in HDR as well. If you're using the game mode expert settings and you're setting it to advanced, you'll notice that the S95F is significantly brighter than the S90F. But this does go a long way in setting it up correctly. So again, reach out if you need help with that. I know there would be some people disappointed if we didn't cover sound, so let's touch on sound briefly. When it comes down to the sound quality of both TVs, the S90F is going to have a little bit of a deeper presentation in terms of the bass that it's going to deliver to you, while the S95F seems like it's more driven by dialogue and presentation of that, so you're going to have a little bit more clarity in your highs and your upper mids, where in the case of the lows for the S95F, it really doesn't feel like there's a lot of presence there when it comes down to bass. And I thought this was pretty shocking because there's a lot of speakers on the back of the S95F, where the S90F doesn't have this same array. The S95F definitely delivers a wider sound, so it's a little bit more surround feeling than the S90F, while the S90F feels more like a stereo experience. I personally think that the S90F is going to be a more desired sound than the S95F, but they're both pretty decent for TV speakers. However, the lack of low end in the S95F definitely did leave me a little bit disappointed, and I do recommend getting a soundbar with both of these TVs, as you will have a better experience with both of them if you go that route. And they both do support Q Symphony if you want to go the Samsung soundbar route. All in all, the differences between the S95F and the S90F mostly lie in the peak brightness difference. So if you want a brighter TV and a more impactful HDR experience, you should go for the S95F. But if the S95F's design choices are a little bit of a deal killer for you, I still truly believe that you're getting a near flagship level experience with the S90F if you go that route. Really, you can't go wrong with either model. There's going to be strengths and weaknesses like we discussed from the S90F and the S95F. The choice is yours. Let us know what you choose in the comment section below. If you want to keep watching videos on Samsung products, definitely make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.